The Galactic Council chamber was designed to inspire awe, floating at the heart of a Dyson ring. Its crystalline walls refracted starlight so that every corner shimmered as though draped in galaxies. Delegates from across the spiral arms sat in tiered crescents, their bodies scaled, feathered, silicon, furred, and chitinous forming a living mosaic of galactic diversity. The chamber was meant to be the very image of unity. But on that day, it was no more than an echo of shattered trust. For weeks, whispers had built among the delegates. Humanity, they said, had grown too strong, too fast. In less than 2 centuries, they had risen from planetary isolation to interstellar prominence. Their fleets, though smaller in number than the great empires, were notorious for defeating far larger foes through a mix of audacity and ingenuity. Their traders reached worlds no others dared. Their negotiators turned sworn enemies into allies. Humanity's relentless adaptability unsettled the old powers. The session began with routine reportspiracy along the Kelvathy routes, famine on Shiraxis, a minor trade dispute between the Varel and the Hosk. Yet beneath these mundane topics, the council chamber buzzed with tension. Delegates stole glances at the Terran chair in the central ring, where Ambassador Jonathan Reyes sat, with hands folded, his sharp features unmoved. He had been through countless such sessions, but today's had a different weight. He knew what was coming. At last the speaker of the council avast. Many-eyed Sefri Elder, whose translucent skin glowed faintly, announced the vote. Motion 742B. To restructure the Terran Republic's Defense Command under direct council oversight. Effective immediately, for the purpose of preserving galactic stability. The words struck like a blade. Reyes did not move, but his aides stiffened. Across the chamber, alien delegates clicked mandibles, shifted feathers, or swayed nervously. Some whispered reassurances to themselves. It was just politics, just procedure. But for those who had fought alongside humans, the proposal was unmistakable. It was not partnership, it was a leash. The votes came swiftly. Green sigils for assent, red for dissent, blue for abstention. One by one, the chamber lit up with green. The great powers voted together, the Vishari hierarchy, the Dominion remnants, the Cytheri Imperium. A few protested minor races who owed their survival to Terran aid, but their votes drowned in the tide. When the tally appeared on the central holosphere, it was clear humanity had been stripped of its independent military authority. Their fleets were to be absorbed, their admirals replaced by council appointees. For a long moment, silence ruled the chamber. Then Jonathan Reyes stood. He moved slowly, deliberately letting the eyes of the chamber fix on him. His suit was plain black, adorned only by the silver insignia of the Terran Republic. He did not raise his voice, but the chamber acoustics carried every word as though he spoke directly into each delegate's ear. You called us partners, he began. Allies, equals. And we believed you. For generations, we bled for this council. Our soldiers died on worlds no human had ever heard of. Our medics healed wounds inflicted by wars not our own. Our convoys delivered food through storms of plasma fire so that your people could live. We stood by you because we believed peace was worth sacrifice. His gaze swept across the delegates, sharp and unyielding. But peace is not built on chains. It is not forged by betrayal. You want our fleets, our soldiers, our strength not because you seek stability, but because you fear us. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Cytheri delegate, scales glittering, hissed, You speak as if humanity were above the law of the council. Reyes turned his eyes on the reptilian envoy, and the silence that followed was louder than any retort. Humanity, he said softly, does not wear leashes. Not well, not ever. The chamber froze. Even those who despised humans felt the weight of the words. It was not a threat, not an outburst, but a statement of truth, cold and immovable. Reyes stepped back from the podium. We came here for peace. But peace requires respect. Since you've chosen otherwise, he paused, letting the silence stretch until even the Sefri speaker trembled. Earth withdraws. Without fanfare, without fury, the human delegation rose and filed out. Their footsteps echoed across the chamber floor, steady and deliberate. No one tried to stop them. No one dared. When the last Terran had vanished through the crystalline archways, the chamber erupted. Some shouted protests, others demanded sanctions, still others mocked humanity's pride. Yet amid the chaos, a heavy dread settled in the hearts of those who knew history, those who remembered what humanity had done in times of true war. For the first time in centuries, the council chamber felt cold, and though few would admit it, many realized the truth. The galaxy might one day fear humanity's power. But what they should have feared more was humanity's absence. The days after humanity's withdrawal were filled with hollow reassurances. Council broadcasts spun the decision as a necessary. Rebalancing. Diplomats gave carefully worded interviews, insisting that Earth's departure was regrettable, but inconsequential. Analysts declared that the Council's stability was unshaken, that humanity's role had been overstated in the public imagination. For a time, many believed it. Trade routes still hummed. Fleets still patrolled. Laws still echoed across the hyperwave. On the surface, the great machine of galactic governance continued turning. But beneath the polished calm, fractures began to spread. The first signs were subtle. Piracy along the border lanes rose by small increments. Convoys reported ambushes in sectors once thought secure. Normally, Terran patrol groups renowned for their ability to adapt, pursue and neutralize raiders would have responded within hours. But with the humans gone, responsibility fell to standard council fleets. Their ships were formidable on paper but rigid in practice. They followed doctrine too closely, hesitated when faced with unorthodox tactics, and relied on slow chains of command. Raiders exploited this ruthlessly. In one incident, a band of Karth pirate cruisers held an entire shipment of medical supplies hostage in the Oryx Belt. A council fleet was dispatched. The battle should have been swift, but the pirates scattered into the asteroid fields. The fleet commander, unwilling to risk ships in unpredictable terrain, ordered a blockade instead. The supplies intended for plague-stricken colonies never arrived. Tens of thousands died before the standoff ended. Quietly, whispers spread. If the humans had been there, this wouldn't have happened. The cracks deepened with relief efforts. When earthquakes devastated the Shiraxis colonies, the Council mobilized aid. Bureaucracy slowed the process. Shipments were rerouted, permissions delayed, captains unwilling to risk hostile zones. In the end, half the supplies arrived late. The rest, never at all. Shiraxis officials spoke bitterly. When Terran convoys came, they did not ask how dangerous the route was. They came because we needed them. It was not just speed that the galaxy missed, but intent. Humanity had been reckless in aid work, yet sending ships into pirate space, landing relief teams during active conflicts, even daring to argue with council protocols if those rules slowed help. But that recklessness had saved lives. And now, in its absence, worlds suffered. The absence was felt in diplomacy most of all. Human negotiators had a peculiar reputation. They lacked the ritual grace of the Sephri, the cold precision of the Cytheri, or the elaborate rhetoric of the Visheri. Yet they had something else, something far rarer. They listened. They empathized. They adapted. Time and again, Terran mediators had brokered peace, where others saw only endless war. A century-old blood feud between the Tavorn and the Kelgari was ended in a dusty room on Mars, where a human envoy convinced both sides to share stories instead of demands. Trade wars, succession disputes. Even religious schisms, humans had navigated them not with power, but with patience and persistence. Without them, old grudges began to fester anew. Treaties collapsed under the weight of suspicion. Border disputes that would once have been smoothed over by Terran voices now erupted into skirmishes. And when the Council tried to mediate, both sides accused it of bias. The chamber itself changed. Every session, delegates sat in their shimmering crescents, their voices overlapping in cacophonous debate. But at the center, one chair remained empty, the Terran seat. Crafted of simple steel, unadorned, its polished surface reflected the light of the chamber's stars. Once, Reyes had sat there, calm and sharp, a reminder that humanity could not be ignored. Now, it was only an absence. Delegates tried not to look at it. They averted their eyes, told themselves it was unimportant. But more and more, glances lingered. The empty chair became a symbol not of defiance, but of loss. Some even began to feel unease, though none admitted it aloud. It was not fear of what humanity might do, but fear of what they wouldn't. Humanity had been the galaxy's relentless mediator, its reckless protector, its stubborn voice of dissent. Without them, everything felt unstable. The Speaker of the Council once remarked in private, "The chamber is quieter now. But it is not peace. I hear it as the silence before collapse." As weeks turned to months, the silence grew heavier. Reports piled in. More piracy, more failed aid, more conflicts reignited. One by one, delegates began to ask themselves a question they would not dare voice publicly. The collapse began at the edges, where the Council's reach was weakest, in the Corinne expanse. Two border species reignited an old rivalry over mining rights. In years past, a single Terran mediation team could have calmed the dispute with a mix of blunt honesty, shared meals, and their infuriatingly persistent optimism. Now, with no Terran voices present, the negotiations collapsed within days. Skirmishes broke out, escalating into full-scale battles that spilled into neutral space. The Council tried to intervene. Formal statements were issued, sanctions threatened, fleets dispatched, yet every effort fell short. Where humans might have improvised, Council commanders followed rigid protocols. Where Terran envoys might have appealed to shared loss and dignity, alien diplomats drowned in rhetoric and ceremony. Peace became fragile, brittle, temporary, shattered by the slightest gust of mistrust. Then came the smuggling rings. Human patrol fleets had once been infamous among criminals. Pirates feared them not just because of their ships, but because of their unpredictability. Humans would pursue raiders through ion storms, disguise entire convoys as bait, or feign weakness before striking with brutal efficiency. Without them, smuggling routes flourished. Contraband moved freely, arms, narcotics, even slaves. Entire shadow empires sprang up in sectors once deemed safe. The Council's fleets tried to adapt, but their commanders hesitated at every turn. Engage only with approval from command, the doctrines read. By the time approval came, smugglers had already slipped into the dark. Ordinary citizens began to notice. Markets were flooded with illicit goods. Border colonies whispered of lawlessness. And in those whispers grew the first seeds of doubt in the Council's authority. But it was the Cathari Dominion that delivered the killing blow. For centuries, the Dominion had eyed expansion. They had been held in check, not by the Council's decrees, but by the quiet, unyielding presence of Earth's fleets. Human commanders had no patience for the Dominion's games. The moment Cathari warships pushed too far, Terran vessels appeared, sometimes outnumbered, always defiant. The Dominion learned to hesitate, not because humans were the strongest, but because humans were the most willing to fight when others quailed. With Earth gone, the hesitation vanished. The Dominion launched a full-scale invasion of the Tharnok clans. Sweeping across their worlds with terrifying speed, the Council convened emergency sessions, declaring the attack unacceptable. Resolutions were passed, condemnations issued, but words could not stop warships. The Tharnok sent desperate pleas for help. Where are the Terrans? They cried across the hyperwaves. No answer came. Instead, slow-moving Council fleets attempted to intervene late. Disorganized and crippled by fear of overstepping protocols, entire Tharnok cities burned while the Council debated whether to authorize direct engagement. The galaxy began to notice. Colonies on the fringes, once loyal to the Council, whispered in anger, "The Council cannot protect us." Only the humans did. Trade guilds grumbled. When humans enforced peace, business thrived. Now chaos devours our profits. Even military strategists admitted privately that without Terran unpredictability, Council fleets were exposed, their weaknesses plain for all to see, and through it all, rumors grew scouts spoke of Terran fleets drilling in silence along their borders, ships gleaming with new designs, formations tighter and more disciplined than before. Diplomatic envoys reported that the Terran Republic had withdrawn from nearly all Council-linked trade networks, building its own alliances with minor powers who trusted Earth more than the Council. What unsettled the Council most was the tone of these reports. Humanity was not angry, not loud, not threatening. They were quiet, focused, patient. Too many species. That was far more terrifying than fury. In closed chambers, delegates argued. Some demanded reconciliation, insisting the Council invite humanity back. Others scoffed, claiming Earth was isolating itself into irrelevance. But none could deny the truth. The galaxy had grown unstable, and the Terran's absence had opened the cracks. It was Ambassador Threx of the Zhurk who finally voiced aloud what others feared to say. He was old, his mandibles dull with age, his voice rough with memory. Do you not see? We mistook their strength for danger. But it was their presence that kept us whole. Without them, we are breaking. Few dared agree openly. Pride was a heavy chain, and the Council had forged it themselves. Still, the thought lingered in every mind. The Council had not just lost humanity. They had lost balance, order, stability, the fragile threads that Terrans had woven into the fabric of galactic peace. And the longer they hesitated, the stronger humanity became outside their grasp. For the first time in centuries, the great powers of the Council understood what regret truly felt like by the time the Cathari Dominion's fleets burned their way through the Tharnok Heartworlds. The illusion of stability had collapsed completely. The Council's proclamations rang hollow. Worlds once loyal to the Chamber were now declaring neutrality or defecting to regional alliances. Merchants, pirates, and even old allies began openly mocking the Council's inability to enforce peace. The only question left was, the one no delegate dared to speak aloud in session, what if we go to Earth? In private, the debate raged for months. Some insisted humanity's absence was temporary, that the Terrans would eventually return out of obligation, out of the very stubborn sense of duty that had defined them. Others argued bitterly that they had no choice. Earth's fleets were the only force the Dominion feared, and without them the galaxy would unravel, at last. Desperation overcame pride. A delegation was assembled, high-ranking envoys from the largest powers chosen for their authority and prestige. Their mission was simple: journey to Sol, quest an audience with the Terran Republic, and convince humanity to return. They traveled in a great flotilla, a show of respect wrapped in desperation. The ships glided into Sol's system like penitents entering a cathedral. They passed Terran defense grid Stenser, and more formidable than ever before. Satellites bristled with weapons. Fleets moved in precise formations, their hulls bearing markings unfamiliar to the Council. Humanity had not been idle. They had been preparing. When the delegation landed on Earth, they were met not with hostility, but with formality. Terran soldiers escorted them through gleaming halls of steel and glass. Everything was orderly, efficient, calm. The counselors noted the absence of alien flags or symbols. Where once Terrans had displayed the Council's crest beside their own, now only the insignia of the Terran Republic adorned the walls. It was a quiet, unmistakable statement. We stand alone now, at last. They were brought into a vast chamber where Ambassador Jonathan Reyes older, his hair now streaked with gray, but his eyes sharper than ever, waited. He greeted them with polite courtesy, though no warmth. The Council envoys delivered their plea. They spoke of the Dominion's war, of collapsing treaties, of pirates running unchecked, of worlds starving. They offered concessions: restoration of Terran military command, full equality in the Council, even greater influence in policy. The speeches stretched for hours, each more desperate than the last. When they finally fell silent, Reyes rose slowly. "You come now," he said, voice steady, "after stripping us of authority. After mocking us as primitives, after using our blood and effort while treating us as tools, now you come because the galaxy burns without us." One envoy, a feathered Vishari, spread his wings imploringly. "We misjudged you. We see now that humanity is indispensable. Please return." The galaxy needs you. Rhea's gaze was unyielding. The galaxy always needed us. But when we stood by you, you feared us more than you valued us. You called us dangerous, reckless, unfit. You thought we would bow to chains. He leaned forward, his voice softening but growing colder. We do not wear leashes. Oh well. Not ever. The envoys shifted uneasily. They had expected anger, perhaps even threats. What they received instead was indifference, the kind that cut deeper than rage. Reyes continued, his words deliberate. Understand this. Humanity has not been idle. We have built something greater than the Council ever offered us. Alliances of trust, not coercion. Fleets that move because they choose to, not because they are commanded. We have looked inward, and in doing so, we have found strength. We no longer need the Council. The question you should be asking yourselves is whether you can survive without us. Silence filled the chamber. The envoys could find no words. Pride burned at their tongues, but fear tightened their throats. They had come seeking a savior. What they found was a nation that had moved beyond them. At last, Reyes delivered the final blow. We will not return. The galaxy mistook our patience for weakness. That mistake will not be repeated. The meeting ended without ceremony. The envoys were escorted back to their ships. As they departed Sol, they passed once again through the watchful eyes of Terran fleets, disciplined and silent. Not a single human officer hailed them. Not a single ship saluted. The message was clear. The Republic had turned its back. When the flotilla re-entered Council space, the news spread like wildfire. The Council had begged humanity's return. Humanity had refused. The Galactic Council chamber was silent, eerily so. The same amphitheater that once rang with gears, scorn, and smug pronouncements of alien superiority now lay shrouded in fear. The humans had left their seats empty, and for the first time in living memory, the absence of a single species felt heavier than the presence of all others combined. The counselors had expected consequences when humanity walked twa, but none had imagined this. Trade routes that once depended on Terran logistics collapsed within weeks. Entire sectors spiraled into famine when food shipments from Earth ceased. Technologies once licensed from human corporations now sat inert, with no engineers to maintain or repair them. Starship fleets, once confident in their dominance, began breaking down without Terran alloy suppliers and the unique fuel catalysts. Humanity had perfected. The Council had not merely lost an ally. They had lost the keystone holding their galaxy together. At first, denial reigned. The Council attempted to substitute other species into the logistical networks humans had run with effortless precision. But every replacement effort failed. Human stubbornness, their strange obsession with redundancy, backups, and planning for the worst had built systems no other race could comprehend, let alone replicate. Within 2 months, piracy spiked 2 levels unseen in centuries. By the 3rd month, outer colonies were begging for Terran. Peacekeeper soldiers once mocked for being too barbaric, now missed for their uncompromising defense. The irony burned. The Council had cast humans as warmongers. Yet it was their presence that had enforced the galaxy's longest age of peace. It was Chancellor Vale, the very one who had mocked Ambassador Reyes during the fateful peace talks, who voiced what others dared not. We have misjudged them. Gravely. Humanity's withdrawal is not a sulk. It is a verdict, but acknowledgement came too late. Across the stars, chaos spread unchecked. Empires long restrained by the Council's unified voice began to stir. Border skirmishes flared into wars. Slave-taking fleets re-emerged where humans once patrolled. Ancient rivalries, once muted by Terran diplomacy, exploded into bloodshed. And yet, through it all, the humans remained silent. They neither intervened nor answered desperate hails. Their worlds were closed, their fleets invisible, their voice absent. Some whispered that humanity had returned inward to prepare, to build, to bide their time. Others feared something worse, that humanity had truly abandoned the galaxy to its fate. Ambassador Kale, representing a mid-tier polity, spoke words that shook the chamber. If they do not return, the galaxy, as we know it, is finished. Humanity was not simply part of the balance, they were the balance. The council voted, for the first time in history, to send an emissary not with demands, but with pleas. A delegation of 30 species traveled to Earth, their ships cloaked in shame. When they reached Sol, the sight of the Terran defense fleet left them trembling. Once alien commanders had dismissed those warships as crude and overbuilt, now, with every vessel gleaming in perfect formation, they radiated silent menace. Not a single human transmission greeted them. Instead, a simple message pulsed on every channel. You chose your path, the counselors begged. They offered apologies, reparations, promises of reform. They groveled in ways unthinkable just a year before. But Earth gave no answer. Humanity did not respond with fury, nor with forgiveness. They responded with absence of void, colder and heavier than war. It was Ambassador Rhea's words, replayed endlessly in the Council's archives, that haunted them one day. You will remember that peace was not your gift to us to you, and you will regret losing it. That prophecy had come true. By the 5th year, the Galactic Council no longer truly functioned. Species withdrew into isolation or banded together in fractured coalitions. The great dream of unity had ended, undone not by humanity's aggression, by their withdrawal. And so, the Council's regret was carved into history. They had mocked, belittled, and dismissed the one species that understood the price of peace. The species that carried scars deep enough to enforce it with unyielding resolve. When humans walked away, the galaxy finally learned what it meant to be without them. The lesson was cruel and irreversible.